We're good, right?
We're good.
So let's get this show on the road. That's right. All right, take two.
There you go. I like that.
We're here to talk about Trials, Dungeons, and Arenas. Right. My name's Jeremy Serra. I'm the lead for the Dungeons and Trials team. I'm going to be joined today by Jason Barnes, Mike Finnegan, Robbie Stevens, and heckling me from the back will be Joe Blackburn. Thought it might be interesting to tell you a little bit about our different team roles. Bear in mind, we wear many hats, so this isn't necessarily any given person's job so much as many people's jobs often. We have boss designers who also do encounter design, basically challenging fights and interesting mechanics.
We have Kai.
That's right, we do. We have content designers, fiction writers, level designers, and world builders. Effects artists, animators, audio engineers, quality assurance, and a producer to keep everybody honest. So we've identified 3 issues that we've been trying to work with. The first one is player incentives. What reason do you have for coming back to our Dungeons and Trials? I'm sorry? And is that enough? That's one of the things we're evaluating. Additionally, we're looking at game balance, and then finally play experience. What's fun about what we've done? What can we do to improve that experience moving backwards, as well as what can we do to create new interesting mechanics moving forwards? So these are kind of the things that we're looking at. There are many more. This is just kind of a broad spectrum. So moving forward, extremely soon, you all have probably heard about scaling. Our dungeons are going to start scaling to the group leader's level. When you're using the LFG tool, it will be plus or minus 2 levels from your group leader. The dungeons will unlock at the levels they previously unlocked. Yes. So for example, Banished Cells, you could get into it. It will scale from level 15 all the way up to veteran rank 12.
Yeah, we unlocked the dungeons in tiers. So
I'm sorry.
Originally tier 1 unlocked to 10, and pretty much it's more or less the level band's the same, but it's basically every 7 levels, every tier will unlock until tier 6. And then moving into veteran ranks, all of the normal dungeons will scale to veteran, up to veteran rank 12. And that unlocks immediately. That unlocks as soon as you hit veteran rank 1. That's something we actually did a couple months ago. As we said, hey, you can walk into any veteran dungeon at veteran rank 1. We don't want to have to make people hear that progression more. Granted, the newer content, the newer veteran dungeons are generally harder or have harder mechanics. The thing we're doing right now is basically with Update 5, Veteran City of Ash will lock at rank 14. You'll only be able to play at rank 14, and that's to keep exclusivity, to keep the items and everything you get in there exclusive to players at the high end, and then we will allow the dungeon to scale later on.
Please. The idea being, as new content comes online, we will increase the cap. So there's one cool thing signed up at the end. At the moment, it is Veteran City of Ash will be coming up to fill that slot. Additionally, as you can imagine, the changes that we made to scaling meant that because our dungeons were designed for specific level ranges, we had to do a fair amount of balance adjustments to make sure that things would scale well across the various levels. We took a massive amount of QA data, compiled data and feedback, and then made tweaks to the mobs, what health they have, what damage they have, as well as doing an audit on the abilities to ensure that they would scale appropriately. So something that hits you at level 15 that then hits you at veteran rank 12 will feel appropriately the same. Naturally, mileage may vary. One of the big things that will change this is the champion system as it comes online. We'll have to continue evaluating our balance. This will continue to be an ongoing process, and I'd be happy to have any feedback in terms of what things are relative to balance and how things feel. One of the things that's difficult is we set a goal in terms of what our balance should be, and then we're trying to ensure that it is actually what our player base is interested in, because it's difficult sometimes to figure out what is too hard, what is too easy. And that's kind of one of the things that we look at in terms of balance. Grouping improvements. One of the things that we've done is we've been maintaining live. We've seen that people have issues with sharing quests. We see that people like to enter instances and they feel like that instance should advance properly as you advance later in the quests. Ultimately, we will update all of our dungeon instances to support this, so as you enter into a dungeon, it will set your quest step to the appropriate step relative to the group. We've also been evaluating the older dungeons to determine what things we can change to ensure that the experience will be solid all the way through. You've also heard about Undaunted Enclaves. If you haven't, hey, we've got Undaunted Enclaves now. In each capital will be an Undaunted Enclave. You will find Undaunted NPCs there. They will offer normal and veteran dungeon quests. Completing optional objectives, for example, killing all of the bosses in a normal dungeon or completing one of the hard objectives in a veteran dungeon will grant you a better key, which translates to a better reward from a different chest. The keys are bronze, silver, and gold. Additionally, coming up in this next package, we have Veteran City of Ash. I'm excited to show you that, or give you a couple teasers to that today. And then we have been working on Imperial City Prison, and we kind of want to give you a sneak peek at that as well. Though that is an update unannounced at the moment, I believe. So, moving on. City of Ash. You all may recall in the previous incarnation of City Ash. Moving on.
It's changed.
Yes. You were asking about that one anyway. Yes.
I like that.
So, in the previous dungeon, Gilrain, our quest giver, strikes a deal with Mehrunes Dagon at the end of the dungeon. She is going to replace the Razor Master that you killed with enthusiasm, and she's going to enter the Deadlands to honor her deal. You end the quest with her husband Finganian, who has been lounging around the entire first portion of the quest. He swears to move heaven and Nirn to save her. Note, stuff's on fire. So, months pass. The fires go out. Nature reclaims the City of Ash. You come back and you join an undaunted expedition led by Finganian. You are going to do what was promised in the original quest, and you're going to go through the portal into the Deadlands and reunite Finganian with Gilrain. I might introduce Mike Finganian.
Finnegan.
Oh,
Finnegan.
Right, sorry, man.
No relation.
They're from the City of Ash.
All right, anyway, that's enough talking. Let's show you something. This is our lovely video capture, so it's not as awesome as it could be. You'll note that we completely revisualized, thank you, sir, the play space. Things are not on fire. Some of the trees that had been burnt are now crispified and actually burnt down. The color scheme is no longer red, it is now blue. That said, that's just one part of it. When you get to what was the end of the previous dungeon at the portal, you find your first mini-boss event, and then the bulk of the dungeon takes place through the portal in the Deadlands. This fight incorporates three bad guys, whatever we're calling them. It's a three-boss fight.
There's basically a tank, a healer, and a DPS that you're kind of having to deal with in a fight where you have to take down all three before the encounter completes. And then once you're done with it, you can walk through to the Deadlands. So the monsters kind of teleport around, so players have to move around the space. And we really wanted to just kind of we wanted to have the last fight, this fight take place with the last fight, take kind of the first encounter, the first hard encounter you come up into. And then after the fact, you walk into the Deadlands, and this is kind of the first vista.
Yesterday I showed too much. Today I'm making sure I show enough. I want you all to be able to experience it. There's some awesome stuff. Pardon me. When I get nervous, I tend to curse. There's some awesome stuff that I'm dying for you all to see. That said, you're only going to see some of the awesome. You're going to have to wait. Yes, that's exactly it. Boom, we've gone through the portal. We are now in the Deadlands. Our world builder, Mike Marciano, has done an awesome job of kind of rebuilding and re-envisioning a modern version of what the Deadlands might look like. Boss fight 2. You want to talk about Horventooth the Fire Maw?
Yeah, so this is kind of the first full harder encounter. And it's basically a green armored Daedra. We don't have green Daedra in the game currently. With Update 5, we're going to be introducing them because they are specific monsters to Mehrunes Dagon's Deadlands. And so here we kind of have a unique model and asset here for this green armored Daedra. So really, he's really huge, he's really big, and we really wanted to play up his mass. So you can kind of see him punching the ground here, causing earthquakes everywhere. One thing we really want to try to focus on here, since we're taking the players into the Deadlands, just want to pause it real quick. One thing we really want to try to focus on also is kind of saying like, well, all right, there's Dremora who live here, there's people who live here, this is where they are. And in the game of Oblivion, they showed they had a little bit of where they live, but here we kind of really want to focus on like what would they do, like what would they be doing here. So we kind of went with a Mad Max post-apocalyptic style of world building, so that you enter this place and you're kind of surrounded by these Dremora all the time. They're obviously going to try to stop your progress as you go. And so Horvor the Fire Maw is kind of the first big step into progressing through the dungeon after the portal.
And he gets really mad.
Next. So we're kind of moving later in the dungeon here. It opens up a little bit more. You get to see more of the Deadlands. Don't want to spoil too much. And here we have our version of the Titan. So the Titan is a specific monster that we created.
I was just paused there, wasn't I?
Yeah, you can keep it going. He made that guy crispy. You can see that guy crispy on the ground. But
That's his name.
We Titans are something specifically that we created for the Elder Scrolls Online. And so when creating, our kind of full-on version of the Deadlands, we really wanted to make sure we feature that monster again. So what we have here is kind of a variant of it we're calling the Ash Titan. And so obviously, since Mehrunes Dagon's kind of like our version of Hell, it's very fire-based. It does a lot of fire-based abilities. So go ahead and play it.
Sorry, vampires.
So, and I mean, one thing we see a lot with these boss encounters, right, is players kind of like to group up. They like to kind of stay as close as possible together to kind of maximize their healing and DPS. So this fight, and a lot of the fights you'll see kind of going forward, really try to spread the player base around and try to kind of push them around these play spaces so that they can't just be clumped up all the time. You can see here there's a lot of fire.
A lot of fire.
And so, one thing, since it's a big monster, we really focus on, especially when we're level designing these new spaces, and make sure players have enough room to, move around, deal with the play space, deal with these special monsters that appear, ads and such during the fight. Really give you enough room so that you can deal with the encounter. And it's hard. It's pretty hard. So we've had a lot of good reactions internally so far.
You saw Finganian and Gilrain get reunited. I won't spoil you with the details. This would be your third introduction to the main bad guy at the end, Vulcan Scoria. You'll note he's a magma dude. I don't want to leave. That's pretty much all I want to say. Fire might be involved.
You say his name again?
Vulcan Scoria, Skoria. Here is, yes, and Vulcan is a title, and here is just a little teaser to his play space. So.
Looks like the Antichrist dungeon for vampires.
This is the Deadlands.
Sadly, yes. We needed a theme.
Should have thought of that before you became a vampire.
Talk about future content. No one likes your vampire guy.
That would Assless be drop from the city of Ass?
That's the special.
That is the
Yeah, Titan.
We'll talk to itemization. Oh my goodness. Things are just going downhill. All right, moving on. As you all may have heard of the Imperial City, we are doing the Imperial City Prison. I thought it might be interesting since we're still in our design phases even. I have my design face on, I'm not sure if you see. Since we're in our design phase, to give you all an idea of what our process is like. These are not actually our internal names, but let's call the first stage preparation because you're getting prepared and stuff. One of the things we do in our preparation phase is, in this case, because this is a dungeon that people all have been to before, players will have certain expectations. We'll actually go into Oblivion, get a feel for what's going on, what are the quests that are related to it, what the play space is like in Oblivion, try and evaluate it both for our needs, how is it going to fit in terms of our mobs. For example, I can tell you the original Imperial Prison area is pretty freaking teeny, so if you want to fit 4 guys in there and have them kill stuff, it's small. So that's one of the things that you need to consider is we also have this expectation because I, as a player, I remember that, and I am dying to make sure that other players that have that same expectation see it. Since the Imperial City Prison focused heavily in the tutorial of Oblivion, that's something that I expect will be on a lot of people's minds. So one of the things we're doing is evaluating things to get a feel for what the play space might be, what are our fixture needs in terms of what buildings might we want, what cool propping might we want. Is there some sort of an interesting I don't know, candelabra that one might put on the table? In this case, we looked at what they had available in terms of the vista from the original Oblivion and how they had envisioned it, and we asked for a whole bunch of fixture support. And they created what you see here. You'll get a little bit better view of it. But just to give you an idea, a good portion of our entrance foyer, which we felt we needed to pay off, was something that we asked for fixture support because we definitely wanted to show what people wanted to see. When I walk in that door, I want the same feeling I got from Oblivion, even though it's 700 years earlier, etc. Additionally, the same phase, we're working on brainstorming our story ideas, what our bosses might be, what interesting locations we might want, either for theater moments, for story beats, for boss locations, just for interesting flavor scenes. And we're always trying to keep an eye on what are our big moments that we have in our dungeon. Sometimes our stories will inform our bosses, sometimes our bosses will inform our stories. In this particular case, we kind of cued in pretty early on what boss we wanted. I'll get to that later, but that helped kind of inform our choice. Daedra are involved in this dungeon, maybe a little crazy. All right, so once we're satisfied that, we move into our pitch phases, or our pitches phase, if you rather. In this case, what we decided on was a key pitch. Lyrinth wants revenge on the Warden. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with Lyrinth. She was one of the Daedra that was a quest giver in Tenmar Walk, Tower of Lies, and the Reaver Citadel. We kind of liked her as a character. She's got an interesting, I don't actually like you as a player sort of feel to her, which is sort of an interesting kind of opportunity for us to have just a not classic either damsel in distress or this is a classic just go kill this storyline. So you have a reason for wanting to interfere with her. Basically, she mocks the player a whole bunch, and it's kind of fun. But just in case you, as a player, don't like the fact that you're working for a bad guy, we also felt like we should do justice to the player that wants to do something positive. So she offers the players a hook, which is there are a whole bunch of prisoners that are captive here to the Lord Warden, and she will help you get them out if you help her. And of course, what she wants is revenge on the Warden. Deal. Period. She don't like him.
Sean Bean dies at the end.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Anyway, to that point, we will draft a map. The one you see here is kind of one of the earliest prototype maps we had. The main thing is it was kind of a study of the flow. This is actually only half the map. The other bit includes the exterior bits and what the original layout of the tower was. So we decided to focus on just the lower end, we didn't want you climbing the tower. What we thought was more interesting was for you to get some of the tutorial experience. So you're going to go through the prison, you're going to go into the sewers, and then you're going to end up in Daedric Ruins, because that's kind of an encapsulated view of what you do in the Imperial prison in Oblivion. And again, we want to pay off that as kind of an homage to the original. It's important to us that we do those things because we are passionate about the lore. We love the stories. We try to do what we can to pay off both our characters as well as the locations and whatnot in the previous games, which are way in the future in our case. We'll draft a map. We'll cue in on specific story beats. We'll try and figure out where we want our bosses to be, what our cool encounters might be, where our theater locations might be. Then we'll get together in a room and we will argue a lot. Which is awesome because we all get an opportunity to say our piece, to get a feel. It's a really good opportunity for checks and balance. At the end, we come up with a repitch. We do a redraft. We update our draft map. And we do that repeatedly, rinse and repeat until we are happy with the story. This is not just the designers. This also includes all of our artists. It includes QA. The idea is we're all involved in it. We want to make sure that what we're doing makes the most sense. So we spend a fair amount of time in our pitch phase to ultimately get approval to move forward into our planning phase. The planning phase, basically we will update our map, but we'll figure out specifically what our story beats in theater might be. This will inform what our fiction might be, so our fiction writer is very key on making sure that we know where things are, what the place they are, what characters we have available. One thing we've learned is we try and avoid having too many characters in any given story. It tends to be, especially with group content, you tend to click through a lot and ignore the text. So we try and make our focus more on selling the experience and showing it rather than just telling it. So we'll have NPCs that kind of move along with you. We'll have them show up in key points. So if you give a shit, you can ask them. If you don't, you can just move on and kill shit. It's up to you. That's kind of the idea, because we recognize this as a group environment. Also, people may not want to wait for you. So we try and respect that. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll say, get to this point, here is an optional theater sequence, for example. You might see, this is something cool. If you're interested in this story, you'll do it. On your 300th playthrough, you'll probably just roll right through that door that opened after you killed boss blah. Anyway, we'll take this opportunity to figure out what our base pop, our basic population for mobs will be. What kind of bad guys do we want? Who are the ones that are high profile? What specific abilities we might want relative to that. Same thing with our boss encounters. We're trying to evaluate what the cool mechanics are that we might use, what special abilities we might come from, and we'll touch more on that. Ultimately, what this allows us to do is plan what our level designers are going to do, what our effects artists, our animators, what fixture requests we might need, what specific models, textures. There's a large list of things that we might need. But the idea is all of this is to kind of get the ball rolling so that we know when we move into, yes. And as an example of that, boss planning, a subset.
Sure. So basically, boss planning kind of takes part. The first part of it's kind of a two-phase thing. First, we have to decide, what specific monsters we want to use, and that kind of informs a lot of our decision making. But then the second part of that is actually, what the mechanics are. For Imperial Prison, the last boss here is the Lord Warden Dusk. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil too much, but here we have kind of a concept piece for him. The Grievous Twilight, which is his monster type, is something new we're going to be releasing for Imperial City. So he's basically a variant of the Grievous Twilight. He's a big bad boss version of it. So one thing, like I said, we really want to make sure that how it's themed and what the boss is doing makes sense for what a Grievous Twilight would be doing, or what this character would be doing for the story. And then we start to look at, okay, what are the mechanics? What would be fun to do? We spend a lot of time, especially when we're making the new content, especially since the game is live now, looking at, what have we done in boss encounters in the past? What have people had good reactions to? What have people had negative reactions to? And we try to really plan accordingly when we're going through that process. So kind of the pre-planning phase is basically coming up with abilities, prototyping the group gameplay mechanics, talking with our effects artists, our animators about the people that really make the monsters come alive, and kind of getting everyone on the same page. Once we have all the pre-planning done, we kind of pitch the boss. We make sure that the art leads and the content leads are satisfied, and then we move into kind of our first pass. In our first pass, we get everything. We take what worked in the prototype, we move forward with it. We take what doesn't work, we throw it away, and then we really start to kind of fine-tune the encounters. We do a lot of internal play testing within our team, and then once we're satisfied that it feels good enough, we start to bring in our kind of QA and our hardcore QA players, people who play the game every single day and have time to play the game every single day and are equivalent, at least what we like to think are equivalent to close to the top player base. So for the veteran dungeons, we try to tune as much as we can to close to the top of the player base. And then, kind of after that, we continue polishing, iterating a lot. And then the last people coming in are the audio guys to kind of put the finishing touches on it. And again, we keep tweaking balance and mechanics up until we branch for our patch, up until we take the data for the patch that's going in. So yeah, that's pretty much the process for the bosses.
And a lot of our planning will show us what effects, what animations, what needs we actually have. So we want to make sure we hit that early because we have a lot of people that are all working together on the same task or on pieces of the same task. We have an effects that will be supported by an animation. We have audio that ultimately will have to come in, and when something explodes, there's going to have to be a cool little explosion sound. Same deal. What do we have for ads? We bring in an ads to the fight. We need to evaluate all that stuff too because we need to figure out what the scope of what we're doing is, because the other thing is we still have a timetable. So we need to make sure that we can create decent content and not spend 9, 20, let me just throw random numbers out, and spend years on it. And then in the end, we now have a new choice, which is, do we want to wear the final boss's head or not? So to kind of bring it back around, once we finish our planning phase, we move into implementation. This is kind of when the rubber meets the road. Our level designers now have a pretty good feel for what the play space is going to be like. We've got a good idea of where the boss fights and encounters will be, where the quest theater might be. That all kind of informs that design to make sure that there's not a huge rock in the middle of, say, one of your boss fights. It is not. This is just a classic. I'm sorry, yes.
There will be other open public dungeons, as you guys saw in Imperial City, though, where people can come and gank you in the head while you're fighting bosses.
Yeah,
There's at least,
and there's probably more. There's at least 12 bosses in the series.
Yeah.
That are open.
But that's not our bailiwick. But it's going to be awesome.
We hold hands. We don't fight. Other
Much. So in addition to level designers moving, our content designers start throwing the defs in to create our quests. What NPCs do they need? What kind of greets do they need? What dialogue is going on? Where are the theater sequences? We start stubbing things in for the art. If there's a cool story sequence and it's going to need effects or animation support, we put that in so that they can start rolling. Ditto with boss encounters and other various encounters. While we're evaluating our base pop, we may decide that we want some kind of unique new ability or unique look for our monsters, for example. So those are the kind of things we start looking into, and then we start dropping in the bosses as well. And all this happens at once. This is not a one at a time. This is we're all rolling. Once we've passed our first bit of implementation, we roll into our first round of testing. As Robbie was saying, that tends to be internal. We have a group of embedded QA members that give us really good feedback early on, help us kind of get the general balance, and then we start to throw it at game balance as well, so we can get a number of different varying feedbacks. Once we've done our testing, we roll into an iterative phase. We now transition from from level design to world building. The key difference being in level design, I'm kind of evaluating the play space, figuring out what the flow is, generally the size of I need a hall here, things like that. And in world building, I now have a lot of these ideas down, and I start building those individual key experiences. This is the boss room that occurs in the prison block cell number 3. There are going to be prisoners that are going to be, never mind. Yes. I'm excited, I'm sorry.
Look at that beautiful creature.
Yep. Once we're pretty happy with the quest and the story involved, we can actually roll into fiction. We start to making tweaks to the boss and the balance, the base pop balance and tweaks as well. Even though we do a lot of tweaking, we don't get it right the first time. We throw it out there, we get a feel for it. It has a general balance for us, and then we get people to try it. And that gives us our first kind of lines. At that point, once we've had our round of iteration, there may be more. Typically, there's a couple rounds of iteration. We'll throw it back at game balance. At this point, we call in the more hardcore QA. We try and get fresh groups so that we can get a good feel for the new player's experience as well as people that have played the dungeons in the past or played previous iterations, so we can get a feel for, as a player, I am playing this for the 4th time. How does this feel? Is it lagging? Am I it too long? Am I not happy about my boss encounter? Lastly, we do polish. The last little finishing touches, lighting that cool little blade of grass in the corner. Our effects and animations start rolling in. At this point, we can tweak the encounters because we now have the animations, we now have the effects, so we tie it all in, make it look awesome. At this point, our quest is usually done, and predominantly we're dealing with theater moments or scripted moments to make sure that we're selling our stories well. Minor tweaks to boss and base pop. At that point, we're pretty much done. When world building is finished, we can start placing critters. I might point out that the Daedrat is one that we considered, but probably aren't going to use. I hope that's not a huge spoiler. It's a negative spoiler, if anything. And then we add chests and clickies. Ultimately, when we're done, we throw in the last thing, which is the final in-game map. We throw testing at it, a little more game balance, serious hardcore QAF. And then usually once right before it goes live, we'll beat on it one more time, make sure that things are in a state we're happy with. That's pretty much the process, and I think that was definitely plenty of talking.
We watch PTS too, so definitely are watching the stream.
Oh, yes.
On PTS, we watch that.
Yes, if you say it in a public space, we're watching.
More like Big Brother.
Yes. Yeah. Nope. Nope. Yeah. We're looking at the forums. We're looking for Twitch streams. We're looking for YouTube. We're reading emails. Yes. No. We're very interested in what you all have to say. I know a lot of times you don't hear that, but it is very true. Dying to know what you all think because we're making this stuff for you. You know, I can make it the way I want it, but that's only gets us so far. As you said, apparently all my thoughts are X-rated, so I want that. All right, to that lack of point, this is our interpretation of the new Imperial City Prison. It has been 6 months since the Daedra have taken over. You can see a lot of Cold Harbor's influence has come in. That is the gate to the Market District. Here you see our first entrance foyer. At this point, you are in the Imperial City Prison proper. Your first little bits, and I'm only going to show you so much. I don't want to spoil too much. But your first bits are the experience that you were used to. This is the cell you spawn in the tutorial, for example. And this is a gate that appeared or got left. Oh, right. Actually, that's a good point. Relative to...
I'll let it keep going, boss.
Fair enough. Custom texture, mind-shriven.
Yeah, so one thing we did with the dungeon is basically because a lot of the prisoners are people from the Imperial City who've been thrown into this prison, we've come up with this new concept for monsters called mind-shriven, which are basically people who've been, they're similar to the soul-shriven, but they're still, somewhat sentient, and they're more or less under the power of the Cold Harbor Daedra, and they're servants to them. So That's what the specific texture you saw in those kind of two monsters.
Quick tease of boss 1.
So all I'm going to say about this guy is his name is the Flesh Sculptor. That's all I'm going to say.
I wonder what happens when people fall in there.
Community hot tub.
Yeah, so he's the Flesh Sculptor.
So what you saw was some of Cold Harbor has started to creep in fleshy, nasty bits of ways. At this point, we transition. Actually, we didn't see that. There's actually a little homage to the sewer, but you're not going to see it in this video. At this point, we transition out into a set of alien ruins. Your end goal is to get to the very end and kill the shit out of the Lord Warden. This is an example of one of the scouts. It's stuffed. Something might happen.
Things would happen with watchers in the prison because they're watchers.
Green means
They
go.
walk.
Sorry, I'm excited. I'm dying to tell you all this stuff. I want you to play it because it will be a lot more fun that way.
So this is one of kind of our boss encounters here, more encounter-based. So there's kind of this pool of poison around the boss space here that the players have to constantly deal with. There's some more stuff that happens. You can see people being thrown back into it.
We screwed over vampires in the previous dungeon, so werewolves.
This werewolf.
This
Yep.
one.
Yeah.
Try and be equal opportunity. This is a Cold Harbor Watcher variant. It's something that I think has just shown up in the game or will just show up. Again, a little more transition. At this point, you're kind of out of the prisons. There are still prisoners.
Yep. And so here's another one of our bosses. If you guys remember the Blair trailer, there's this big thing called Flesh Colossus, and this is our version of him. We're calling him the Flesh Abomination, and he has his two friends here, the Necrotic Horrors, and because like we talked about earlier, we're screwing over vampires, and now we're going to screw over werewolves. So there's a lot of poison-based abilities and attacks here that the players have to deal with. And so again, we're really trying to play up these big monsters, especially Flesh Colossus, because of the Blur trailer and everything. So we wanted to give them some really big, powerful abilities that you're going to see play on here a little bit. So those Necrotic Horrors spit poison, and that poison is really bad. It's really, really bad. And that's all I'm going to say. You can see him coming out of the ground there. The ground's desecrated, and these people are made of, the Abomination and the Horrors are made of human flesh, so, when certain abilities go off, zombies come up out of the ground, all that flesh underneath your feet.
And they look nasty.
Since he's a big guy, he has a lot of power, so, he does things like slam to the ground and, kill all his minions because he doesn't care about them. Yeah, so because the Daedra like to have fun with people, they might let their cages open and see what happened in some of the sections of the dungeon. They might find some spike traps, maybe. This is something we added recently, right here.
It is. What is that? What an interesting tint on that armor. Guide to a putrid flesh teal. That sounds lovely. I understand there was some sort of a competition. Yes, apparently not. All right. Yep. Yes. Exactly. Anyway, so yes, we created a character, added a name. Our first two runners-up got their names put in the note. We have the tint. The tint is called Flesh Putrid Teal. And we would like Beldar, to send us a screen capture, and then we will make awesome. Yes, congratulations. will make an appearance that looks like your screen capture.
You are winner!
So you get to go in the city of that?
Well, it is future.
Future updates. All right. Anyway, and then yeah.
This is a dark.
All right. Things have gone. Yes.
A little
it must-
teaser of the last boss's area here.
I am dying for you all to see this.
The Giant Dance Club.
It is.
It is.
True. Maybe.
Oh, man.
With our character names, yes, probably. And that is the Imperial Prison. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Down the road, we have some plans. We've been making plans, talking about ideas, but I kind of wanted to open it up to you all. We have a number of ideas. Hold on. For dungeons in the offing, a number of ideas for trials and arenas. We're exploring the idea of adding solo arenas, and ultimately we would like to add an easy and a hard mode to make things a bit more accessible to the casual players. That would have the added benefit of we will evaluate the balance and then be able to make hard mode damn hard because there's now an easy mode. I'm fine with that. We can ask.
Easy and
And then yes, that's it. Please talk to us and we'll harass you all too.
You guys want to talk about birds?
We love birds.
I'm just a little bit disappointed that you guys stuck a PvE dungeon in the middle of PvP zone. Like, we see PvE stuff get out all the time. PvP has got anything in it since pretty much 3 years. So a little disappointing for me.
I can.
Imperial City, PvE already has like 6 new updates before.
Well, the Imperial City is pretty darn large, but I certainly see your point, and you can see about doing better, making sure we release things that are balanced more effectively, or we can see if we can. Of course, some of that is outside of our bailiwick.
So I love the work you guys have done with the 4-player dungeons. I think it's tremendous. It's like one of the best small group dungeon experiences I've had in an MMO. Unfortunately, I can't really say that translates to trials as well. I feel like in terms of the grandeur and scope of the 4-player dungeons compared to the trials seem sort of shallow, extremely short. I don't have that sense of awe that I had when I walked into, say, like a certain Shrine Tavern. That, oh wow, this is amazing. I'm going to be here with my buddies, and we're going to be struggling with this for months. And I'm wondering what you see as the future for large group PvP content in ESO.
To clarify, do you mean visually, or do you also mean mechanically that the trials are too short? Both visually and mechanically.
Both visually and mechanically. I'm also not a fan of the Soul Reservoir time system either, and I think a lot of folks that have really loved raiding in past MMOs would really die to see something more similar to what they grew to love out of those experiences.
So that's actually one of the main reasons why it's good to have you guys here and us here too, because this is the kind of feedback that what we have seen is somewhat on the forums. We actually want to talk to you guys about the specifics about trials and the trial format. And I know I've seen some people mention about wanting more traditional type raid and stuff like that. And I would like to dive deeper a little bit into where the areas in the trials, specifically the time, I know you said the time and Soul Reservoir, where do you think that doesn't hold as much interest for you?
I would be happy to get up and talk for 30 minutes.
Well, if you're going to dinner night, I'm going to dinner night too. I'll bring a pad of paper and write down something you guys want to talk to me about.
I mean, maybe one quick maybe the quickest thing I can say is that I think that the timing and the Soul Reservoir tends to shift the point of conflict in the event from an external one to an internal one, where like an accidental death within your group becomes incredibly costly, and it makes a point of contention between yourself and the people that you're working with in order to accomplish something.
So you feel that the level of competition is amongst yourselves rather than against them, or against the
Well,
encounters and stuff?
partially, yes. I mean, I think it means that you have to be very careful with who you bring with you into a trial if you're trying to get a top time. But I also think that, you know, competing over who can do something the closest to, 8 or 9 minutes is not at all what I think of when I think of like epic endgame PvP. It's not even close.
Let's definitely talk more about it. And also, this dialogue doesn't have to end at dinner.
Yeah,
You all can send
Jeremy
us.
will give you his number
Yes.
in his column.
we have actually seen that feedback where people have said that they want a more traditional raid type experience, which is definitely something that is doable design-wise and stuff. So what we can do is definitely explore that and see if that's feasible for us to do with all the other initiatives that we have going on. So we definitely take a look at that.
And we get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I definitely get
There are similar feelings in the studio. Naturally, we explore many different directions. We did actually a fair amount of focus testing on our initial trials to kind of settle on the format that we had. That said, this game is a living organism, and if we're not quite hitting the bar, we need to figure out what it is that we can do.
And
to adjust.
to answer, like, all of us here are gamers too. We've all been through, all the WoW high-end raids, the EQ high-end raids, the SOTOR high-end raids, all the stuff. So we have a good basis that we're pulling from here.
Well, I also don't represent everyone.
No,
There may be
that's fine.
people in this room that actually completely disagree with what I just said.
Right.
So, just one perspective on that.
The red shirt.
To comment on the Soul Reservoir specifically, I somewhat agree with the Tropos. I think that the Soul Reservoir can be detrimental to raid groups, but I felt that it was reasonably balanced towards AA and Hellrock. And now that Serpent has come out and has the same Soul Reservoir, it feels very limiting because Serpent is astronomically more difficult than AA and Hellrock were. So you get a lot of groups that are, they finally kill Manticore and they have to do it 5 or 6 times before they get enough lives to actually make it through the crash and then get to the last boss. And then now they have to do Manticore another 15 or 20 times in order to even attempt the Serpent. So you end up doing the first part of the trial over and over again just to experience the last part of it. And it becomes very disappointing for the players and very, a lot of our players don't want to do it because they're not interested in killing that horror over and over again, just to try.
So if we were to take just Soul Reservoir aside, the difficulty in Serpent, because you specifically mentioned that you didn't, you thought that the trials were essentially too easy. It was a short 15-minute romp through the thing. It was too
More
short.
a concern of brevity than the boss encounters themselves.
Right. So what I was saying is, with Serpent, do you think that difficulty-wise, as far as the encounters are concerned, do you think that hit more the right note?
I do like the difficulty of 2 of the encounters, the Manticore and the Serpent. The 2 middle encounters feel like mini bosses. I don't know if that was intended, but they are very easy. One of them, the first one, the troll, we killed in 1 shot. The second one took us 2 attempts to kill it. So they were very easy, whether that was intended or not. But the actual length of the whole thing does feel very long. And the trash content for something with like lives and having to do it over and over again, it felt very long. And that would be very good for a raid where you didn't have lives, but when you do have lives, it kind of makes it feel like we're doing this over and over again. It's taking way too long to get to the content. I think in a night of trying Serpent, we spent 4 or 5 hours, and we saw Serpent for maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
I want to agree with what Focus was saying. I'm not a big fan of the Soul Reservoir for various reasons they said. And the difficulties of the current trials excluding Serpent, because I really like the but the other two just seemed, there wasn't much of an epic feeling to them. Like you go from one boss, teleport to another boss, teleport to another boss, there's no in between fight, you just teleported and got right into the fight. What I expected before you released the trials was something that shot us here. I mean, it's a 4-man dungeon that takes 2.5 hours to do, and it's phenomenal. It's probably one of the best dungeons I've done. And something like that as a trial would be phenomenal in a sense that it's got multiple wings. If you just want to do one wing and stop for that, and go back in and do the other wing, and your time would continue on. So whoever the leader is would hold that time.
You take Warrior, Mage, and Serpent together,
Yeah.
make them a little bigger, add a little more trash, and then that's a trial.
Yeah.
Like that's a raid.
Like I would love it if you took Shadow Spear and made it 12 man. That'd be phenomenal.
I'll get on that.
I think
Yeah,
I'm gonna try and do my best
To speak to Atropos' thing, I like the time thing, but at a certain time. That sounds weird. So maybe a solution to this would be for people who don't give a shit about the weeklies or the leaderboards to have the soul reservoir and the timer turned off. And they would not be put on the leaderboards, they would not be put on the weekly, and they wouldn't get the weekly drop. However, they would be able to run it without fear of having to restart and shut down. They could just keep going if they're just there just to get the loot drop from the bosses. Would that be something?
That's not why we're there though.
Well, I'm saying because you don't like the soul reservoir, right? And it's limiting you because you get to Manticore or whatever in Serpent and you're already out of lives or whatever. And you just turn that off and you're not going to be on the leaderboards weekly. You can just keep going, figure it out and not have to stop because like you finish Manticore and you only got 5 lives left. What's the point? You have to stop. If that wasn't a factor for just waiting, learning mechanics and stuff, I think. However, the trial would probably be a lot faster than that, but I mean, it is a double-edged sword. That's just something I thought off the top of my head. And then, yeah, and then I guess.
I just wanted to point out how hard AA was, and then as the game matured, that became really easy. So maybe we'll see that happen.
And like I was saying when we were in QuakeCon, and the guy, I don't exactly know who was commentating on us, and they're explaining the mechanics of bosses, you down them so fast they weren't even able to explain them.
Right.
I think the fastest we got the Stone Age knockdown was 8.5 seconds for Stone Age, or sorry, not the Storm. Stone Age and Arc was 38 seconds, and Mage was a little over a minute and 45 seconds.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I was expecting to be that fast. And, with the time and everything, there's always someone crashing, flying off a cliff on their boards and stuff. Restart the run, you're all screwed. Like, it's your fault, even though let's say I crash, it's not my fault. I get animosity towards me, even though it's not my fault whatsoever that my game crashed. People are gonna hate me inside a little bit. Like they're not gonna say it.
That's exactly what I was getting at.
No, I think that's
I
a very
understand
valid
that
point.
competition between people to say if you messed up or something even not in your control has happened and you're like, you screwed up this run, now we gotta start over.
But it's like,
that. I understand
and
that
then-
completely.
And then there is a time for competitions and stuff, like through the service or Reservoir on to make it competitive to go. But for weekly nights when you're back from work, you don't want to be hard on bitch stack because you're forced to go off a cliff in AA. Like it's not your fault. I've done that all too. Someone pops rapid maneuver and I don't know it, and I go straight off the edge because my horse just speeds up, and I'm like, oh god. And thirdly, I'm sorry, but
Fine. Well, we're here.
We want to hear it. Yeah.
You got
I'm gonna
2 more
forget
minutes, so
if
you're
I
good.
don't stop. So with hard mode, it wasn't what I was expecting it to be. The warrior, it was like hard mode for 5 minutes, and like getting there was the same experience, same old BS. And then the warrior was cool. Strats, I'm not gonna say him if anybody wants to be in secret. I don't like.
So you're saying hard mode was too easy?
Yeah, I'm not. If anybody here
The
cares
actual part of
about
the
that,
hard mode that was any different than normal mode was fine. Like Warrior itself was cool. But
that was I really like when we like took the time to look at our Twitch videos to figure out the straps and stuff. I think I love the discovery process, so I don't like asking you to go for the straps and vice versa, because that's the player experience and learning it for yourself. And like using our strat, moving around, stacking in front of the statues and aiming your shield, that was really cool. That was a really good job, guys. Like we were like sniping two statues. We were doing like vertically, the back like straight and then vertical. We got that down to a science. But in like AA, the first time we cleared it, we didn't know about the stacking strat. We just did traditionally and had everybody dodge meteors. It's not meteor, you get hit in the face with meteor. But the stacking strat with the negate, like the negate negates everything. Like it's supposed to. It's like a 20-foot mage and a 6-foot tall guy is able to negate God. Everything. It negates meteors. It negates her chain lightning. It's like, really? That's the end of hard mode is a negate? Just one ultimate negates hard mode. And like, yes, it makes it a lot more easy for casuals to want to go through hard mode. But was that your guys' intention to have one ultimate be to defeat the mechanic?
I think for part of this, definitely with AA and Hellrock, we were making those trials, and we were completed making those trials before you guys had probably picked up the game. So we had some pretty big flubs on difficulty. We did not expect monsters to still make seconds. And we got to the point where we're happy in Serpent with kill times. But now we're seeing a sort of a new wave of issues. Whereas the Soul Reservoir wasn't penalizing in AA and Hellrock, it is incredibly more penalizing in Serpent. And I feel like the same thing sort of with hard mode. We were a lot more hit and miss. Where Serpent hard mode is really, really, really hard. And every time we go through a wave of content, we sort of learn more about, we need to account for this. That's the strategy that's going to come out of this, and how are we going to make sure that that's not something that we see again. Can I just get a quick straw poll on people that have tried Serpent as a trial? And how many people have beaten Manacora? And how many people have cleared AA and Hellrock? So I think one of the things we need to look at in the future is Serpent is definitely harder. But are we limiting the amount of people that can see that content? How can we get both?
That was actually one of the things I was going to talk about too. Is there's growing talk within the company of you saw mentioned easy and hard mode, not just for trials, but I can speak to what we're discussing with trials. We want to make content that serves both masters, so to speak. We want to make content that the hardcore audience will appreciate, and as well as we want as many people to see it. We don't want to spend so many man hours on a small population to see, because we don't necessarily get our bang for our buck. So with easy and hard mode, what that potentially allows us to do is take a look at some of these encounters and take a look at some of these trials and dungeons and stuff, and take a look and say, okay, we want more people to access it, so let's dial back some of the difficulty on some of these, but then for hard mode, really go in and hardcore rebalance these to say, okay, now these are going to be trials experience. These are going to be experiences that players, if you like the experience of Serpent and the difficulty of that kind of stuff, we can bring everything up to those levels to challenge everybody on every single level, so that we don't have that gap in difficulty where you say, AA is really easy, you go on hard mode, and then you get the Serpent and you're wiping all night.
The easy mode sounds like an exact fit for turning off the timer in the Soul Reservoir and not doing something like World of Warcraft where they just lower the difficulty. I feel like just easy mode would be just no Soul Reservoir, you can keep going, you don't have to stop. And I really hope you guys don't cheapen the experience, and make it easy enough for everybody to clear, because someone bitches that it's too hard.
Right.
I think it really will take the pressure and the difficulty off if they don't have to look at that counter and say, okay, I have one more life and I have to start over. I think just turning off the Soul Reservoir and the timer, easy
I think what you may see, and it may not be exactly like this, but for anyone who's done Dragon Star and has done normal mode and bet mode, there's quite a leap of difficulty. And we're seeing a lot of people completing normal mode, but they're still having to work together. They're still having to figure out the strategies. But there's no soul reservoir to it. You can stay in there for 9 hours if you want. In fact, I watched a streamer, Epic, literally play in Dragon Star normal mode for 9 hours straight. I didn't watch all 9 because
I was gonna say,
but
Why weren't you working?
but everything, the mechanics got a little bit harder. The monsters hit a lot harder. There's more monsters in some cases. So that, in a way, was kind of a test bed. And I think what we're seeing with that, at least from what I can kind of see, is it's working really well doing it that way. And plus, it allows guilds to go in and kind of learn the base mechanics, and then we add on to that. You know, anyone who's played bet mode knows when you go into normal mode and then when you go into bet mode, you have to basically prep for a lot more that's going to be coming at you, and you're going to have to change a lot of your strategies. But the baseline is still, there's a lot of similarities. So.
Did you guys really, sorry, just to find out if I didn't get an answer, was negate meant to negate hard mode, AA hard mode?
no, it was not meant
No,
to
it
negate.
was not.
No, it was not.
So is it a bug that it
We don't-
negates
we
the
don't
gears and
want-
everything?
So here, this is a situation where we have to constantly evaluate the abilities we have in game and how they affect our account. So in that regard, it would probably be, you probably just consider that an oversight on our part. So that we need to reevaluate that and take a look and say, okay. So the difficulty where that comes into is the leaderboard. In that if you have a mechanic and you put in and you have a leaderboard involved, and people go through and they beat it really, really fast, and then we say, there's a mechanic that we probably didn't intend that makes this fight a lot easier. You then change that mechanic. You then nuke essentially all the leaderboard progress, and you have a global leaderboard that's been around for a while, and then it's like, well, those people got it. They have like a little asterisk next to their name. It's like they did it when it was easy, and then we made it hard or something like that. So it's something that we constantly have to reevaluate with that. I would not say that we would ever design anything where one particular ultimate or anything is designed to negate most of the mechanics.
Literally.
So that's not intended.
Hey, it does what the name says.
Yes, it does, which is why we kept it in.
Let's
wait,
let's move on. Yeah, please. Or yeah, you and then you were very patient.
Leaderboards and all the extremely appreciated hard work you guys are doing to balance. How do you feel about external buffs coming in and completely imbalancing that experience?
You mean the AVA buff?
What?
You mean the AVA buff?
Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. And how does that reflect upon the value of the leaderboard as giving you any meaningful information?
That is also a constant balancing act we have with AVA. We are aware of the AVA buffs. The goal for the AVA buffs, at least talking to Brian Wheeler and them, was for them to be a bonus but not a necessity. I know that they're taking a look at making changes on their end, or at least reevaluating how those buffs are. And we want to. I don't have a definitive answer for. Oh, we're just going to strip them out of PvE counters or anything like that. Because we haven't made that decision. There is discussion. We haven't made that decision. But what we're the AVA team, when they come and talk to us, and we go into discussions with them now as a group, we can say, okay, this is how they're kind of affecting the trials, and this is how they're affecting the dungeons, this is how they're affecting the PvE encounter, and it's X% increase in the damage. This is going to result in people thinking that they have to go and get those kind of things, and we're going to try to balance around that so that that isn't the case. We don't want anybody to go into a PvE encounter and say, well, I have to go PvP for a half hour so I can get the keep, so I can get the bonuses, so that I can actually do the encounter. That's not the goal.
That is not our plan.
Yeah, it's not the goal. But it is a balancing act with AVA because those have to be meaningful. We want people to go out in AVA, but at the same time, we don't want to trivialize our encounter. So you can see there's a balancing act, and I really don't have a definitive answer of yes or no. But I can tell you that we are discussing it, and it is something that's we have tons of email threads about, hey, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do
It's a hot topic.
Yeah, it's a hot topic. Like this door. You get a Smurf shirt.
When you go into the trial, have those buffs be like wiped off you from that time?
There's a lot of potential solutions, and I will write down every suggestion you guys have, and say, hey, you know what? Here's a ton of suggestions that we have. We've already floated a bunch to the company, where we said, hey, what can we do? Everything from flat out stripping it away from PvE to negating it while you're in certain encounters and stuff like that. We're gonna probably have to come up with something that's gonna make sense to a lot of players. But
Make an extra Oblivion and go through the forest.
there you go. No buffs whatsoever.
Works for one.
All you can bring with you is your own buff.
Sorry,
buffs are really
you've been
awesome.
very patient.
I'm sorry.
One final thing, then, yes. You're
I
next.
think they're really awesome. I think they're really important incentives, and I'm glad that they're there. I just think when you talk about like the concept of an instant raid, you can only balance one time. It's like it gets to the point where one group of people has this like a permanent passive buff, another group of people basically never has it. It's just kind of
Yeah,
defeats the purpose.
we need to put our heads together and come up with a solution that works as best we can.
And we are, and that's one thing I wanted to reiterate to you guys. Is that is definitely one of the topics that we're all talking about is AVA buffs and how they relate to PvE encounters and challenging encounters and how because it is a factor when we say we want to gear this for really really hardcore players.
Yeah.
We have to take a look at all the factors involved and says if you're gonna have AVA buffs. What do? We either going to make it so that you have to have the AVA buff or not, and then it might make it a little bit.
Just out of curiosity, when your QI guys are doing it, do they have the AVA buffs?
Yes, they'll test it in various ways. That a lot of times they'll have other stuff. They'll have like player. Stuff that you won't have. Honestly, they'll have gear that'll be better than a player can ever get. They'll have stuff like that, so that we can approximate that if. Because believe it or not, the players are oftentimes going to be better at our game than we are. So what we do is we try to compensate for that, especially in testing and stuff like that. To say, hey, these are the baselines for what players are going to be able to accomplish in game. So we need to bring our stuff up to what essentially they can accomplish.
Yeah, and an example of that with the buffs is like recently came up was like the Gravelwood buff, right? Or doing the practice quest. Like, I actually did that quest and I made that buff, and that buff was never actually supposed to like go leave with you, right? And that's something that got changed at some point, and we missed out on. And as soon as we saw that it was something that players were pulling in, Eric went ahead and turned it off because
Yes.
it wasn't supposed to
Good
happen.
job,
So
Eric.
we're,
Good job,
Eric.
we are
Yep.
paying attention to those things, right? Like we're reacting to them. The AVA one is just a harder one to solve.
Yes, please. You've been extremely patient.
My guild likes the dungeons, but at the moment, when you've done them, and maybe you've done them the second time, you get annoyed. And then you can more or less run through them again. Although there is no purpose for doing so yet, well, this will change with the unlock. But what I wanted to ask is, if you ever have thought about including riddles, maybe even somewhere where the group has to split and they have to be random if you do this. Because as soon as somewhere in the internet the solution for a riddle is the rest of the players won't think about it anymore. They just would read what is the solution, go in there, make it, don't try it on their own, and then it would be useless again. So some kind of random moments in the dungeons. So it would be more interesting to do them over and over again because you're getting to the riddle and it's again different. You don't know. Okay, last time it was this and this and this, and I can go on, but you have to see what it is now. What do I have to do now? And
So
split up the group and then get it together again.
So we've done prototype work on that kind of thing. Random puzzles that have multiple ways to complete and stuff like that. We have in design there's a finite number of ways we can do that, just for sheer complexity. Because the more complex something gets, the more apt it is to break. So but I know that Dave he did a lot of prototype work on that exact kind of thing. And I know I talked to him a bit, and we've discussed on the dungeon team in particular ways to implement this so that it's not the same experience every single time you go into it. You have different paths or something like that.
And the other thing is that hidden rooms that you need to detect. Maybe there is something on the screen saying you're feeling a trap, and then you say, "Oh my God, there has to be something here." And you start to look around and look where the hidden room is or something like that, and you go inside and find something that otherwise, if you don't spend attention, you just won't get. And you will say, "I just want to run through that as fast as I can." Well, you missed that.
Yes, we've evaluated a number of ideas for ways that we can improve the experience so that it is not the same exact experience. Moving forward, we will probably make efforts, especially to include things along those lines. Moving backwards, we'll have to see what steps we can take to make that experience more interesting.
I mean, yeah, one thing we found when we've been doing these things and kind of testing some of them is some random elements are good, some random elements are bad. What we're trying to constantly balance is figuring out what can we make in our timeline in order to get the most out of the experience for the player's overall experience. But like Jeremy's talked about, like in the future, we've definitely, and Mike's talking about, we have prototype stuff. We're trying to figure out ways to have, different ways to do small group content that doesn't necessarily fit into the category of dungeon or veteran dungeon or trial. It's something, there's no definitive plans at all, but that is something we talk about.
And both of those exact suggestions have definitely come up more than one time.
Again, no plans.
You're in the same space.
Yeah.
No plans at all, but we talk about these things for sure.
Definitely
Yeah.
a discussion.
And the last thing will be in the Daggerfall Covenant area, there is a solar. And it was so much fun to do this. So please.
So we've actually been there's a very hot topic internal discussion right now about taking Dragonstar and scaling that down to solo player. And that's what you see when you see solo arenas right there. That's
Yes, please do this.
that's a
We're
discussion
excited
that we
about
think
the
that,
idea.
yeah, we're excited
but
about
we
the
want to
opportunity
evaluate
potentially
what's the
do
best thing we
a
should
solo
be working
arena.
on.
And I think that combined with a leaderboard and stuff like that, that's definitely going to be an EP measurement that a lot of people want to.
Can I fight Joaquin Phoenix?
One thing I wanted to touch on though real quick for at least replayability is obviously we're starting some of those, hopefully like the Undaunted and Enclave, the pledges that you're going to be doing for those should help. Scaling the dungeons should help a lot, that you can literally play any dungeon scaled up, and that's like I talked about earlier, normal to veteran will scale, veteran to veteran will scale as well. And then also in the future, the champion system will be something that you're constantly progressing with your character. And so the dungeons will help that a lot. Actually, recently with this update to this patch, we looked at Dungeon XP and touched that a little bit, especially for the veteran dungeon experience.
We should have written that down, yes.
Yes, we did. We specifically looked at the veteran dungeon experience, especially since we're going with the champion system on the board, and we looked at the experience games there, and we started messing with that. So we're trying to find balance.
So can I probe you guys about one more thing real quick? There was a lot of conversation about the Soul Reservoir and Death Taken Off Time. And so that all I think feeds into the weekly leaderboard. And what it means to be on the weekly leaderboard or what it means to be on the weekly leaderboard. Do you guys like the concept of trying to get on a weekly leaderboard every week? Do you think it should be a longer time to get on there? Do you think it should be more competitive or less competitive? Right now, if you generally do the trials, you may get a really bad spot if you're going to get a spot. So your feelings on the leaderboards in general, do you like them, do you not like them, would you rather all the loot come from the trials?
Just
shout it out.
holler out, and then I want to call on you since you've been very patient.
My response to that is that I think that the leaderboards don't measure what they're supposed to measure. Because when you have to change the balance, when you have to rebalance, when you have to change the structure of the trial itself, it kind of distorts the meaning of the people that were on the leaderboard before those changes were made. I mean, so historically in other games, what's worked really well is that the raids start out incredibly hard, and if anything, changes make them easier over time. You never make them harder, you only make them easier if you encounter problems like reasons why players aren't competing it. So if you adjust in that way, then timing actually makes sense. Like a group that got it done first did it when it was harder than the group. I mean, if anything, changes to the balance of the raid need to be consistent with the timing, with the ranking that players perceive in terms of who's best. So if you order it on like who did it first, and if any adjustments to the content only scale it down but not up, then the team that did it first is the team that did it best. But if you're gonna monkey with like the way that it works, and like some things will be made easier, some things will be made harder, especially if you're gonna make things harder. Like if there's some massive exploit where someone runs in and gets it done, and then you fix that, well, they're at the top of the leaderboard now, forever. It's global. So, I mean, it's not consistent. The ranking isn't consistent with what players are doing. So I don't.
The long term or the ones that we
I mean, potentially if you can commit to. So I mean, if you ever change the balance of the arena, you have to reset the leaderboard. Or I mean, if you ever change the balance of the raid, you have to wipe the leaderboard because it's a different. Or you have to archive it and say, here's like, you know, this was the patch 1.3 leaderboard for AA, and now here's the patch 1.4 leaderboard. But you know, if you change it, you have to reset.
And touching on how important that is, under no circumstances does it make sense that your time on the leaderboard should be impacted by these outside buffs that have nothing to do with you.
Wait, I think I've heard that. I'm sorry.
Sensing
May
a
I
theme
call on you, the
here.
lady in black?
I do have something to add to that.
I'm sorry. Did you have a point? You had your hand up for a long time.
Yes, I have a point for casual players.
That's a please. I was actually speaking to the woman in black. You had your hand up for a long time.
After her.
After her,
Yes.
you're next.
Yep.
After her, you're
Sorry,
next.
I'm trying to get everybody in some semblance of order. Please don't be.
So I have a question about dungeon. Could you offer us a dungeon like jump and run, like Indiana Jones or something?
Oh, like
So
our
we have
action
to
base.
avoid the rolling stones and spikes out of the ground.
So we,
Like Super Mario Brothers.
yeah.
Where like kind of, and that's a simple explanation, but kind of like it moves with you, so that it keeps you kind of constantly moving and stuff like that, or die or something like that. Is that funny?
Yeah, we love the idea of incorporating the environment either into our fights or into our dungeons and trials. That's something we've been trying to get more bang for our buck.
Okay.
Well,
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, like one thing I want to talk about though is definitely with the newer dungeon content that we've been making. We've been trying to focus on a lot of like what you guys actually do, right? Like, and we are an action-based game, so we're in our encounters we're trying to push a lot more movement than we did in the past, right? Like it's something and it happened in Dragonstar a lot too. It's something that we're trying to do. One thing is our gameplay system doesn't necessarily do right now is kind of what Jeremy's talking about is having the ability to possibly have a wall move with you. There's just some restrictions we have to deal with, but I mean we've talked about these things before. Maybe not having the same standard, like there's a boss in a room and that's it, right? Like maybe the boss could follow you through multiple rooms. Maybe that boss pushes you through multiple rooms, right? These are all discussions we have. So right, and it's like, and so these are all things again within production time and the time allotted we have, but these are definitely things we're thinking about in general, right? Just what people like, what we think would be fun, what you think would be fun.
And we did do a little bit in Craglorn. Shada's Tier was mentioned earlier. There's the moving gas clouds that kind of creates where you have to constantly move.
Very funny.
Also in Craglorn, there's another area that's actually a little bit more Indiana Jones, Ronnie Zaw, which is a school. There's invisible platforms where you throw sand and you have to run.
This was so great.
There's also the dark, like the bubble you have to stay in, and it moves and you have to fight through it. So we're definitely, as we're learning this stuff and we're kind of seeing player feedback, we're experimenting with these types of things. So, you know, if you like that type of stuff, let us know so we can do more of it. Because we had a blast making that type of stuff. So
We love to see
Have a blast more often.
what you all enjoy. Yes. Sir.
Our group has some problems to find a tank or a healer. Sometimes the search for
In LFG?
in LFG is not so good. We can't find any new one, and so will there be a tweak to the search or a zone search so I can see which player are in the zone
zone so I can speak to him and say, hello, you are a tank. Have you? Because I'm spamming the word channel and nobody is responding.
So
yeah,
yeah,
we
I'll take that one. So
briefly.
there's two things I touched on a little bit. The LFG tool is in the process of iteration, right? And one of the biggest things that's happening right now for Update 5 is basically with the dungeon scaling that if you queue up for a dungeon, you're going to be put with anyone that's +2 or -2 of your level. So that should help a lot. The system didn't do a great job before of doing that, so it's going to be a lot better than it did before. Another thing is with the pledges and the weekly quests, just the Undaunted pledges, there will be a lot more player population wanting to do specific dungeons on specific days, and so that should help a lot, right? That should. And so pretty much anyone who is at your level who wants to play a dungeon and a specific dungeon based on the pledges or just something you're trying to do, that process should be better. Granted, we're going to have to see what happens when it goes live. We're going to see how well it works, and it's going to be something that the gameplay team is looking at. But that's kind of the first steps.
I think we've noticed that in other games where you have a quest or something like that gears you towards a specific dungeon. You get a lot of people that are saying, "Oh, I got to do that. It's the quest that I have to do today or this week or something like that." So that should help with. I can't find a group to do City of Ash because nobody wants to do it.
The other thing was that in doing the Update 5 improvements to the LFD tool, they did kind of bug with matchmaking. So that would be probably one of them.
I didn't even think it worked. In other games, there's option 233.
Yeah.
And we are going to continue improving the LFG tool. We aren't specifically involved, but we have input into it. So I don't want to speak directly to it, but this is only the first round of improvements to the LFG tool.
I actually have one question to make. Earlier there was a statement about how the trials didn't have the same grandeur as other raids and other games. We did actually put a lot of effort into creating these like end moments, like in the Warrior trial. He has a sword, it blows up the walls. Okay, so you guys actually noticed that stuff. You invest a lot in it, and I just wanted, from a producer for the team, I want to make sure that we're spending our like. If it's not something that you guys appreciate and not something that you guys noticed, then.
That was appreciated.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I meant more about the grandeur of the environment itself and the sense of like awe and danger and
Going through an entire adventure together that lasted for hours.
A lot of it is that. Cool. Sir, in the back. Thank you. Yep, sir.
Okay, so my comment was with regards to difficulty on specific levels of things like Dragon Star and things like that. On certain levels, two that I'd like to point out are Stage 7 and Stage 9. I won't mention the mechanics for anybody that hasn't done it, but there are specific mechanics on those stages, and in a lot of cases it feels like the mechanics weren't hard enough, so you guys tried to just add more difficulty. And in a lot of cases what resulted was that it felt like there was a lot going on, but nothing specific was supposed to be focused on. And on those stages, we knew what was supposed to be focused on, but in a lot of cases there were so many mechanics going on that if we let our attention slip from one little thing, it would cause us to wipe completely. And we actually ended up naming Stage 9 Live Roulette. In a lot of cases there were so many mechanics that would just instantly kill you, and it was impossible to pay attention to all of them at once. And we were hoping that we could kind of avoid that type of content, because it's too difficult to pay attention to 5, 7, 8 different mechanics all at once.
So to kind of speak to those two stages specifically, when I was designing Dragon Star, Arena 7 is kind of where it hits big boy mode.
Yeah.
And that's the best way I can put it. That's kind of the, okay, you've done good so far, we're going to crank it up a notch. With 7's tricky because there is a strategy to it, and once you figure it out, I've watched groups go through it and lose 0 lives.
Oh yeah, and we've done that too. It's the fact that there's so much going on all at once that it feels like you can't let your attention slip ever for anything. And in a lot of cases, especially Stage 9, it feels like we feel kind of lost in terms of how we can deal with the problem, because there's so many different things that we have to focus on all at once, and we can't just solve one and see that our problem has gone away, because there's still another problem.
So with Stage 9 specifically, I've spoken to a couple of you about it actually. There are some upcoming changes to that stage. I agree. I've watched tons of streams. I've probably watched over 100 streams. And that one, there was just a lot of confusion. There was a method on PTS where you could burn down certain monsters quicker than they did in their mechanics, and I fixed that. And then people started kind of running into a wall, and there was a lot of randomization where you could just get screwed.
Yeah.
So there are changes coming to that. I can kind of give you a sneak peek because they're going to be patch notes. It's not really giving you any advantage. The order in which the mini bosses spawn in Stage 9 is being changed. They will not spawn as the first guy, so you won't be able to stack. But they will not summon ads right away when they do their spirit split. What should help provide players the time to do the intended mechanic without getting screwed. And also the guys underneath have been slightly nerfed a little bit because exactly that. It was too much of a randomization element to it. So I'm definitely addressing that, and that should hopefully be coming here within the next couple of patches. But seven I'll definitely keep an eye on. I've seen 9 screw people over, and there wasn't really a lot they could do. 7 is a concentration thing. Like if you slip and let one of those guys hit.
Yes.
But I have seen players recover. But I'll continue to watch it. And if it seems like there's just too much randomization, we can adjust it. Because I want a little bit of randomization, but I don't want it to feel cheap.
Right.
So.
And our issue with 7 wasn't actually anything to do with the mechanic itself of the fight. It was just that while we were doing that, we had 7, 8, 9 additional ads that the tank basically had to take care of by himself because everybody else was off dealing with the mechanic. Yep. And what ended up happening was that one random mob would go off and one shot the healer or something, and then we had a problem there.
Okay.
And that was the problem that we encountered.
Cool. No, that's good feedback. It's it's one of those things I'll definitely pay more attention to that and see kind of what kind of data we're getting back to as well. So,
I think almost all of us are coming to dinner. Please harass us. And again, after dinner, it doesn't have to be over. We're happy to hear you. We definitely want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think when you get to doing the revamp, allow us to keep them multiple limits. Because having to pick one and then sit there and wait 30, 40 minutes until someone's like, hey, I want to do that one too.
Right.
Yeah, so
Duly
right now,
noted,
you
yeah.
will be able to queue for all. It's either one or all, but that's good. Yeah, definitely.
And also, kind of just a side topic, just kind of a little announcement because I know. I know you're from Defunct, but I don't know what your name is. About itemization between normal and vet mode in Dragonstar.
Yeah.
So we are changing some stuff, so you guys kind of get the breaking news on this. I worked with Eric and the itemization team, and we kind of just talked it over.
How long have you been there?
He's a ninja. A couple changes that are coming for anyone who's done the Dragonstar. All humanoids are going to drop gold now.
Even the Dragonstar mobs, the waves?
Yes, the waves will all drop gold now. The way it's balanced out right now is if you wipe a ton, you're still going to lose money because of repair costs. However, if you have a good run, you should come out making money. We've also added, what's that? Well, there's more. We've also started including ornate items that can randomly drop in the chest in addition to the stuff you already got. If you saw the spreadsheet that Eric had earlier. Yeah. They're going to sell for a lot more. Vet mode will drop higher tiers of those in value, so you'll actually make more money in vet than you would in normal mode. So that should help offset some of the costs. So if you do a good run, you should walk out. I don't want to give any numbers, but you'll walk out on the green. I know people were going through like 3,000 gold just in like a couple of arenas. So that should be a fix. And then one of the big things is the final. Sorry. I'm trying to get this in as quick as possible. The final boss will now drop all V14 gear, including sets.
Is normal in it?
Just in vet. That includes the footman, archer, healer, destruction mat stuff, and they will no longer drop random blues. So you won't go and spend 3 hours and then get a bow of flame or something like that. So we are listening to you guys, and oh yeah, and Eric buffed all the master weapons, which he kind of mentioned earlier. The
No
ability
more
altar.
ands. No more
And
ands.
I love you
No
all.
more
Thank you.
ands. She had a comment.
Oh,
Do we
yes.
have time?
Comment.
Oh, it's a comment.
As Pedro Pretty Eagle, we love the dungeons. I love Tempest Island because it is not in a cave or a building or anywhere inside. It's outside. We just finished the dungeon before we realized, okay, this was a full-man dungeon because we have not seen an open dungeon for a long time. The dungeons are the best dungeons I've seen since a long time. And when we made the dragon thing there with the 2 wings, yes, that tear.
The tears.
When we finished it, we before said that this was not a dungeon, this was a full-man raid.
Awesome. we can take pictures.
In plug stances.
We all have to pose flex.
And we're gonna take a short break before the last presentation of the day, the justice system. So thank you all.
Yes. Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure getting a chance to talk to you.